Welcome to Good Goodbyes, the Funeral Facts podcast. We are really glad you found us. In this podcast, me, Simon, a funeral director,
And me, Tina, I'm an independent celebrant.
we will discuss all things funeral in an informal space to demystify what happens when we say goodbye.
Based on your questions and queries, Si and myself are two industry professionals that are going to chat through the hows, whats, and wherefores. We actively work in the funeral industry in Devon in the UK. So we hope you enjoy the episode ahead. Welcome to Good Goodbyes. Hello, this episode is about children's funerals. So if for any reason you don't want to listen in to this topic, Si and I completely understand, and we'll see you at the next episode.
Hi everybody. Yeah, a subject that we've been asked about a couple of times and felt that we should absolutely do an episode on. But as Tina said, it's not something some people want to hear. We completely understand that, and yeah, please just sort of press stop, skip to the next one, and we'll catch you on that one. But if it is something that you're not interested in necessarily, but want to understand a little better, then yeah, we'll talk about the options that are there, how it works, some of the terms that you might hear, and what can be done beyond burial and cremation, because that really isn't all there is when it comes to children's funerals.
Thank you, Sam. That's just such a lovely start. I think most of us in the industry and most of you listening today would never want to be going to a children's funeral. You know, most of us think that we should definitely die before our children do. And so it never feels right on any level for any of us. But when a child dies, we want the goodbye to be really sensitive and personalized. I mean, all of our goodbyes are designed in that way anyway, but it's just an opportunity to work really closely with families, from my point of view, to be sure, at a time when often their grief is so raw and so upsetting for them that making decisions can be terribly difficult. So they might need a little bit more guidance. And often it is one of those situations in which family, friends, and relatives are just lost as to what to say and are very lost as to how to be with a family at this time. And sometimes the children's funeral, the child's death was expected. The child had an illness and they weren't going to survive that illness. And on other occasions, it is sudden and unexpected. So we're dealing with all of that, and we are there for families when this happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to understand that this is not, we're not talking necessarily just about babies here. We're talking right up until kind of 18. Certainly for me and a lot of other funeral directors, that 18 is what we're considering a child. And we're starting early on. We're starting about a term that you may hear, which is NVF, which is a non-viable fetus. So that's a child before 24 weeks. And there are some slightly different options there and different rules there, because a lot of hospitals, if you miscarry at that age as it is, that they can offer different things, such as a cremation that's taken place through the hospital, and then sort of garden remembrance that they use there. But you're still absolutely entitled to come and have a funeral, and the remains to still be cremated and or to be buried. What's important to understand is that's free of charge. There is no charge for that. No, crematoria will not charge you. Burial grounds will not charge you. Um, from 24 weeks on, people are entitled to support from the Children's Funeral Fund. And that is at the point in which a child is deemed that they could have lived. So it's no longer necessarily a miscarriage. So that 24-week cutoff is there for that reason. Again, burials and cremations are free, and the cost of things like the coffin can be claimed back by the funeral director from the Children's Funeral Fund. No funeral director worth their salt should be charging you for these things anyway. I personally, in my business, up to the age of 18, we will provide a funeral free of charge. Hearse, staff, whatever it is, we will do that free of charge. If you decide to have horses, if you decide to have lots of flowers, things like that, those are costs that are out of our control. We may well have to make charge from, depending on the supplier of that. The supplier may not make a charge, in which case, of course, we wouldn't. But that's something to be mindful of. And picking a funeral director based on that, because it's a mark of respect. It's against the natural order of things, like Tina said, to be losing a child, and the least we can be doing in our communities, because I see myself as a custodian and a part of my community, that we should be doing that for free. We should be supporting those families through that, without making charge. And then the terms you're gonna kind of hear from there is prenatal, is that 24 weeks up to birth. Neonatal, that first 4 weeks, immediately after birth, and then infancy through childhood. And the support should be the same, and the options that are available to you should be the same. From your 16-week-old NVF miscarriage through to your 16-year-old, if you want a funeral service in a crematorium with a celebrant, you can do that. If you want a church service and a burial to follow, you can do that. It doesn't change. Those options should be made available to you. That's really important.
And I think when you're crafting a service for such a young infant, there are lots of things that are possible that make it feel like you have been a big part of saying goodbye to this child. So you can definitely carry your infant, especially when they're smaller. And I have seen parents carry children up to 12, 14, depending on the size of the child. You can certainly travel in the car and have the infant right next to you on the seat. You can have a part of your service where you name the child. Now, as a celebrant, I would always suggest this, because often there was a name in the background, in the back of your mind, for this child, if it hadn't been born and formally named. And this is your opportunity to give that name. And I would create a bit of a service where we name the child and we talk about why the name is special. And then we say the goodbye after that. So you can definitely incorporate things like that. And I would suggest thinking of the role of siblings. So, you've often got young children in the family too who were expecting to have a brother or sister, or maybe they didn't even know that there was a pregnancy. But, there's definitely a role to be played in relation to that. And you can do things to make the setting really informal for young children. You can sit on cushions, you can sit on the steps, you can move all the chairs out the way. You can have the child in the middle of a space and be a circle around that space. You can read stories. There are some fantastic stories. And in ceremonies, I would encourage a story to be read, maybe chosen by one of the siblings, by the parents, if they feel that they can do this, which is like saying a goodbye story to your child. There are lots of choices around poems and music, and it's just that gift of personalizing this, even though you're saying goodbye in a very, very reluctant way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I've got to, as with most of these podcasts, or certainly my part, is some of the formalities rather than the softer side of things, as Tina's role allows. So for a an infant that is NVF, so up to 24 weeks, you're not going to be registering the death. So that naming can be really important, because there isn't going to be a birth and death certificate, which there would be after 24 weeks. A birth certificate will be issued, even though it's a stillbirth. And then a death certificate will have to be issued by a registrar as well. You're not on the clock. That's not within 5 days, as it is with a lot of sort of deaths at a more natural age. That they give you, well, sort of weeks and weeks and weeks to do that. But the naming can be important because of that, because you may not have had that opportunity. A lot of families we look after, this little one is baby of, and then the family name. So having that opportunity can be really, really important. I think what Tina touched on with regards to sort of being involved with siblings and the family's involvement is really important, because there isn't a huge life story to tell there. You're not going to be spending half an hour talking about accomplishments and where they went to school and what they kind of went on to do in work life and things like that. So the service has to be tailored to that, and it has to be about how they were part of the family, and even at a very, very young age, what was important to the parents, and why this little one is going to be in the family, and the name they were going to take, and how they were going to be a sister to or a brother to. So you have to make those adjustments when there isn't a story to tell, because there's always something, even if it's the story of how the decision was made to have this baby, or to have this child. And that's as much of part of a life story as anything else. Such a difficult one this today, Tina. It really is, but I think it's really important to have this conversation.
Yeah, it really is, because I think today in today's modern world, we really are very considerate around this difficult goodbye. But if you speak to people who lost children in the 1960s, they never had any services. They didn't have anything. So it does feel like such an honor to be involved in this, and to just spend time with people, having the kind of conversations that Saya said, like their first smile, if they were old enough, or the wishes and dreams that you had for them. And and where they are now is often sometimes important to the family, where they perceive or believe the child is now, where the child's energy is, or whether the child's gone to heaven or not. So those are conversations we would have with you, or a minister would have with you. So I just wanted to kind of touch on in the background, there are loads of really excellent charities. So SANS is a really brilliant charity. It stands for Saving Babies' Lives and Supporting Bereaved Families. It's got the most excellent website, and sometimes people make donations after children's funerals to organisations like theirs. But also, at the other end of the spectrum, it's very hard to lose someone in their teenage years when they were so close to adulthood, for whatever reason that has happened. And there are lots of places, and I've done a funeral of a young person of 17, and looking out into a group of mourners, which include lots of their friends and their college mates, is just so sad, because you've got, for many of those young people, it's the first time they're encountering that, as well as the family dealing with it themselves. So for schools to know, there's Winston's Wish, which is great, looking after people up to 25 years of age. We'll put all these things in the show notes, but there's something called Hope Again, which is for bereaved young people. There's Child Bereavement UK. The Samaritans are helpful. Childline is very helpful. And Families in Grief is also a good little place to connect for additional support. So there are folks there in the background, as well as your funeral director and your officiant, who we'll be there as a listening ear through this difficult time.
And we should be signposting you to this support as well. There are books out there as well that sort of storybooks to read to siblings and things like that, because that conversation is not an easy one. Trying to explain to a little one why their little sister's not with them, or why their little brother's not with them, or why even the other way, why mummy's not there anymore. So let's not forget that while we're talking about sort of children. It may not be the loss of the child, it may be the child's loss as well. But yeah, there are resources out there, and absolutely we should be supporting you through that and signposting you with that. So yeah, as Tina said, we'll put a load in the show notes so that you can kind of get a bit of an idea of what is out there. And I hope nobody needs it. But we know that's not the case. So that's what it's there for.
Thank you, Si. And just as an end point, we will at some point in the future do a specific episode on grief. But if you are a friend or neighbour or know anyone who loses a child, please don't cross the road. Please do find a way to connect with them, whether it's just expressing your sorrow, whether it's the fact that you knock on their door and say, I've made a cottage pie and you might not be up to cooking, so here it is. People just need to be reached out to. It feels a very lonely place. And I think all of us can just make those small differences in whatever way, we feel okay to do. But, I just encourage you all to do that.
As Tina always says, be kind to each other. Thank you for listening. Take care.
You've been listening to Good Goobyes, the Funeral Facts podcast. Please do like, subscribe, comment and share. Drop any questions on our social media, on Instagram, or in the text option in the show notes.
Si and I are qualified professionals, but we always advise our clients to seek any additional support from medical practitioners if they need to. And we hope you enjoyed this episode. Stay well and be kind to one another.